Sophia. Her newest post, apparently, has gone viral again. It's been exactly 1 month since she announced our breakup on Instagram. Our breakup. Funny how it still feels like a shared thing, even though she was the one who detonated it. She did it on our 2-year anniversary, of all days. A smiling selfie, her hair perfectly tousled by some unseen, artfully directed breeze, eyes sparkling with a light I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The caption was a masterpiece of curated vulnerability. Starting fresh, leaving the past behind, grateful for the lessons. Lessons. As if our 2 years were some kind of self-help seminar she'd finally completed. I'd reacted with a heart emoji. Just a simple red heart. Then I'd opened a new tab and booked this solo cruise. Everyone thought I was insane, or in denial. My mom used the word unhinged in a hushed phone call to my sister, a call I wasn't supposed to overhear. Mark, my best friend, just stared at me, his brow furrowed. "A cruise, Danny? Alone? Are you sure about this, man?" Maybe I was both insane and in denial. But something happens to you. Something shifts deep inside when the person you'd mapped out your future with, the one you'd whispered dreams to in the dark, decides to end things so publicly. When they turn your shared heartbreak, your very personal grief, into content for the masses. You either crumble completely, let the digital tide pull you under, or you find a different kind of strength. A strange, brittle resolve you didn't know you possessed. I chose the latter, even if, at the time, staring at that smiling selfie, I wasn't sure what that meant. Even now, with the sun warming my face and 1,000 miles of ocean between me and her, I'm still figuring it out. 1 month ago. The memory plays in sharp, painful focus. I was practically vibrating with excitement, a nervous energy thrumming just beneath my skin. 2 years. It felt significant, a real milestone. I was at Ballerini's, the little jewelry store downtown with the antique display cases, and the owner who looked like a kindly old owl. Mr. Ballerini was carefully placing the custom necklace into a velvet box. It wasn't an engagement ring. Sophia and I had talked about it, agreed we weren't there yet, that we wanted to enjoy this phase, build a little more. But this necklace, it was special. A silver chain with a tiny, almost abstract wave pendant. She loved the ocean, said it was the only place she felt truly free. I'd sketched the design myself, spent weeks getting it just right. "She will love it, Daniel," Mr. Ballerini said, his eyes twinkling. "It is from the heart, this one." "I hope so," I remember saying, my own heart swelling with a stupid, hopeful pride. Then my phone started to buzz. Not just once, but a series of rapid-fire vibrations. A group chat with my college buddies. Then Mark. Then my sister, Sarah. I remember frowning, a flicker of annoyance. Couldn't they wait? I was in the middle of something important. "Everything all right, son?" Mr. Ballerini asked, noticing my distraction. "Yeah, just popular today, I guess," I mumbled, pulling out my phone. "Dude, you okay?" That was from Liam. "Danny, call me, ASAP." Mark. His texts are usually just memes or football scores. "Daniel, what's going on? Is this true?" Sarah. Her message was laced with a confusion that mirrored my own burgeoning unease. True? What was true? My thumb, slick with sudden sweat, fumbled as I tapped on the Instagram icon. And there it was. Sophia. Her face, perfectly framed, filled my screen. That smile, that goddamn radiant smile, behind her, blurred but recognizable, was the little cafe where we'd had our first date. The caption, it was long. I skimmed it, words blurring, my vision tunneling. 2 incredible years. Journeys sometimes diverge, new chapter, so much gratitude, wishing him all the best. #fresh start, #self-love, #new beginnings, #letting go. My breath hitched. The velvet box in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 2 incredible years. Journeys diverge. She was announcing our breakup to her 50,000 followers on our anniversary, while I was picking up her gift. The post was already exploding. Likes ticking up like a slot machine hitting a jackpot. Comments flooding in. Hundreds of them. "So brave of you, Sophia. Sending you strength, girl. You got this. His loss. You're a queen. So sorry to hear this. You guys were #couple goals." Strangers. Offering sympathy to her for a decision she'd apparently made without me. I felt the blood drain from my face. The air in Ballerini's, moments before smelling of polish and old wood, now seemed to crackle with a suffocating, static charge. We'd had an argument the night before, something stupid about her spending more time curating her brand than with me. It was tense, sure, but nothing that screamed this. Nothing that suggested a public execution of our relationship. Mr. Ballerini was saying something, his voice a distant hum. I couldn't make out the words. My world had narrowed to the glowing screen in my hand, to her smiling face, and the hollow words beneath it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was a pathetic attempt to retain some microscopic shred of dignity in the face of global humiliation. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the only response that felt as empty as I did in that moment. I liked the post. I tapped the heart icon. It turned a satisfying, sickening red. Then, without a word to Mr. Ballerini, I turned and walked out of the store, the wave pendant cold against my palm. The apartment felt alien. Or maybe I was the alien. Our shared space, the one we'd painted together, argued over throw pillows in, cooked countless meals in. It echoed with a silence that was louder than any argument. Her scent, that vanilla and sandalwood perfume I used to love, still clung to the air, a ghostly reminder. I found her in the living room. She wasn't crying. She wasn't packing. She was filming. Her phone was propped up on a miniature tripod on the coffee table, a ring light casting a clinical glow on her face. She was talking to it. Her voice modulated into that earnest, slightly too chipper tone she used for her vlogs. And it's been really hard, guys, like incredibly emotional. But I know this is the right decision for me, for my journey, you know? Sometimes you just have to choose yourself, prioritize your own happiness and growth. She saw me then. Her eyes, usually so expressive when the camera was off, flickered for a nanosecond. Annoyance? Or just surprised that I was home so early? She didn't stop the recording. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice barely changing register, as if I'd just walked in from getting the mail. "Sophia," I managed, my own voice sounding rusty, unfamiliar. "What the hell is this?" I gestured vaguely, encompassing the phone, the ring light, the entire surreal scene. She finally paused the recording, a sigh escaping her lips as if I were the inconvenience. "Daniel, can we not do this right now? I'm kind of in the middle of something." "In the middle of what? Monetizing our breakup?" The words tasted like ash. "Our anniversary, Soph. You posted it on our goddamn anniversary." She stood up, smoothed down her perfectly distressed jeans. "Look, I was going to tell you, obviously." "When? After the edited version went live? After you'd picked the perfect filter for my public humiliation?" She finally dropped the influencer mask. A flash of irritation crossed her face. "Okay, fine. I've been planning this for a few weeks. And yes, the timing, it was strategic." My stomach twisted. Strategic? Breaking up with me was strategic? "It's just business, Daniel." She said it so calmly, so reasonably, as if explaining a marketing campaign. My followers, they respond to vulnerability. They love authenticity. Big life changes, personal struggles. It drives engagement. My numbers spike whenever I share something real. Real. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and obscene. I looked around the room at the carefully arranged bookshelves, the candid photos of us she'd framed, after taking 50 versions of each to get the lighting right. How much of it had been real? How much of us had been content? I remembered the early days, before the follower counts and the brand collaborations, before every dinner out required a flat lay of the food, every weekend trip a meticulously documented itinerary. We'd go hiking, get lost in the woods, laugh until our sides hurt, and the only record of it would be in our memories. Her phone would stay in her pocket. Her eyes would be on me, not on the screen, not calculating the best angle for a story. When did that change? When did I become a supporting character in the Sophia show? "You already have plans to move out, don't you?" I asked, the realization dawning with a cold, sickening clarity. This wasn't a spontaneous decision fueled by last night's argument. This was a product launch. She nodded, avoiding my gaze for the first time. "I signed a lease on a new place last week. It's closer to the city, better for networking." She gestured vaguely. "My stuff's mostly packed. I've arranged for movers tomorrow. Everything arranged, every detail managed. Except for the courtesy of a private conversation with the man she'd supposedly loved for 2 years. The hurt was a physical thing, a vice around my chest. But beneath it, something else was stirring, a cold, hard knot of determination? Or maybe just sheer stubborn pride. I wouldn't be the weeping ex-boyfriend in her next viral post. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction, that content. "Right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Business, got it." I turned, walked into our bedroom, my bedroom, apparently, and started pulling a suitcase from the top of the closet. If she was starting a new chapter, then so was I. And it wouldn't be as a footnote in hers. Sleep was a distant, taunting fantasy. The apartment, stripped of half its personality with Sophia's pre-packed boxes stacked neatly in corners, felt like a mausoleum. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren amplified in the suffocating silence. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The glow of my phone the only light in the room. Messages. So many messages. Concerned friends, confused family members, even a few of Sophia's followers who, for some reason, felt the need to DM me their condolences or, worse, their unsolicited advice. "So sorry, man. She'll regret this." "Daniel, are you okay? Mom's worried sick." "You deserve better. She was always a bit much with the social media stuff, TBH." I scrolled through them, a dull ache in my temples. I appreciated their concern, I really did. But replying felt like opening a wound, inviting a flood of questions I didn't have the energy to answer. I didn't want to be the subject of pitying conversations, the sad ex-boyfriend everyone whispered about. Sophia had already curated the public narrative. I didn't need to add my own tear-stained chapter for their consumption. It was sometime around 3 a.m., that dead hour when the world outside seems to hold its breath, that I found myself typing "last-minute vacations" into a search bar. My fingers moved automatically, a desperate, almost primal urge to escape, to put physical distance between myself and the smoldering wreckage of my life. Flights to anywhere, remote cabins, all-inclusive resorts. My eyes were bleary, the screen a blur of turquoise waters and white sand beaches. It all felt performative, like something Sophia would book, purely for the Instagram potential. Then, an ad popped up. "Caribbean Dreams, Solo Cruiser Special, 10 Days of Paradise departing in 3 days." A cruise. Alone. The idea was ludicrous. Cruises were for honeymooners, for families with screaming kids, for retirees playing shuffleboard, not for heartbroken 30-year-olds fleeing the digital shrapnel of a public breakup. And yet, there was something about the sheer absurdity of it that appealed to my frayed, exhausted mind. It was the opposite of anything Sophia would do. It was messy, impulsive, completely un-Instagrammable. The money. I'd been saving, diligently putting aside a portion of my paycheck every month. For us. For a down payment on a small house just outside the city. For a future that now only existed in the cached memories of my mind. Reckless abandon. That's what it felt like. A tiny, defiant spark in the overwhelming darkness. With a few clicks, a blur of credit card details entered with trembling fingers. It was done. A 10-day Caribbean cruise, solo, leaving in 3 days. I stared at the booking confirmation, the vibrant blues of the promotional image mocking the gray reality of my mood. I took a screenshot. My thumb hovered over Sophia's name in my contacts. Part of me, the wounded, angry part, wanted to send it to her. See, I'm moving on too. I don't need your curated pity. But I stopped. No. That was her game, not mine. Playing by her rules would only keep me trapped in her narrative. Instead, I opened my own rarely used Instagram account. My last post was from 6 months ago, a blurry picture of a concert. I uploaded the screenshot of the cruise confirmation. No filters, no carefully crafted caption, just the stark reality of the booking. Then I typed, "Sometimes you need to sail away to find yourself." I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Almost immediately my phone buzzed. Mutual friends, their profile pictures popping up with likes and surprised face emojis, and then a new message notification. Sophia. "A cruise? What are you doing?" I looked at her message for a long moment. Then I put my phone down, a small, bitter smile playing on my lips. Let her wonder. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. Maybe it was control. Maybe it was just the exhaustion finally catching up. But as I drifted into a fitful sleep, the image of a vast, empty ocean filled my mind. The next 3 days were a blur of manic energy and hollowed-out numbness. My apartment, or what was left of it after Sophia's movers had efficiently stripped it of her presence, felt cavernous. Her side of the closet was bare, the bathroom counter cleared of her myriad bottles and jars. It should have felt liberating. It mostly just felt empty. I packed hastily, throwing clothes into my suitcase with little regard for what I might actually need. T-shirts, a couple of pairs of shorts, swim trunks I hadn't worn in years. My movements were jerky, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to keep busy. Flashbacks ambushed me at random moments. Sophia, laughing as we tried to assemble a flat-pack bookshelf in this very room. Sophia, her head on my chest, as we watched movies on the sofa that was now mine alone. Each memory was a fresh stab. On those previous vacations with Sophia, packing had been an event. Outfits were planned, accessories coordinated, everything meticulously chosen for its photo-worthiness. "This will look amazing for the gram, babe," she'd say, holding up a brightly colored sundress against a backdrop she'd already scouted in her mind. Now my crumpled clothes seemed to mock those perfectly staged memories. Mark came over the night before I was due to leave. He found me surrounded by piles of laundry and an open suitcase that looked like it had exploded. "Jesus, Danny," he said, surveying the chaos. "You look like shit." "Thanks, man. Appreciate the honesty," I mumbled, shoving a pair of socks into a side pocket. He didn't lecture. He didn't say, "I told you so" about Sophia, though God knows he'd had his reservations about her influencer ambitions. He just grabbed a beer from my fridge, handed one to me, and started helping me fold shirts. So, a solo cruise, huh? He said, his voice carefully neutral. Still think that's the best plan? It's a plan, I said, taking a long swig of beer. Better than sitting here, staring at the walls where her fake, candid pictures used to hang. Running away won't solve anything, you know that, right? Mark's a good friend, loyal, practical, always there. He doesn't sugarcoat. It's not running away, I insisted, though a part of me knew he was right. It's giving myself space, to process, or to not process. I don't know. I just need to be somewhere else, somewhere she isn't. Somewhere her digital ghost couldn't haunt every corner. He nodded slowly, zipped up my suitcase with a decisive tug. All right. Well, try not to fall overboard, or get married to a mermaid, unless she's really hot. I managed a weak smile. No promises. The day of departure was a strange mix of anxiety and a weird, detached calm. The cruise terminal was a chaotic swarm of people. Families with kids already bouncing off the walls, elderly couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing excitedly. And me, the solo traveler. I felt like I had a neon sign above my head, recently dumped and mildly desperate. Boarding the massive ship was an exercise in awkwardness. Just one, sir? The check-in agent asked, her smile faltering slightly when I confirmed. Every other person seemed to be part of a pair, a unit. I navigated the gangway, my suitcase bumping against my leg, feeling profoundly, conspicuously alone. My cabin was small, functional, with a tiny balcony overlooking the endless churn of the water. It was clean, impersonal, perfect. As the ship's horn blared, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through my bones, I stood on my balcony. The cityscape of Miami receded, buildings shrinking, the noise of the shore fading. I watched until the land was just a smudge on the horizon. Then, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and with a sense of ceremony I didn't know I possessed, I powered it off. The screen went dark. Silence. The ship pulled away from the port, gliding out into the open sea. And for the first time in a month, I felt like I could almost breathe. The first full day at sea was a lesson in disorientation. The ship was a floating city, a labyrinth of themed bars, glittering casinos, and sun-drenched pool decks teeming with humanity. I wandered through it all, a ghost at the feast. Everywhere I looked, there were couples holding hands, families laughing, groups of friends already 3 cocktails deep before noon. Honeymooners beamed, their happiness a tangible, almost aggressive force. I felt like an interloper, an uninvited guest at a party I didn't understand. I tried. I really did. I went to the orientation talk, a painfully cheerful affair led by a cruise director with an unnervingly permanent smile. I even attempted a trivia game in one of the lounges, but the questions about 80s pop stars and obscure geography just made my head ache. Every activity seemed designed for pairs, for groups. My solitude, which had felt like a shield when I boarded, now felt like a spotlight. Dinner was assigned seating in one of the grand dining rooms. I approached my designated table with a sense of dread, expecting to be the awkward 3rd, 5th, or 7th wheel. Table 37. It was a round table, set for 6. The first to arrive were an elderly couple, an image of comfortable, time-worn affection. Arthur, a spry man with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, introduced himself and his wife, Eleanor, whose smile was warm and genuine. "Celebrating 50 years, Arthur announced, patting Eleanor's hand. 50 years of her putting up with me. Eleanor just chuckled, a soft, melodic sound. Next came a woman who looked to be in her late 40s, her eyes holding a hint of weariness, but also a spark of defiance. "I'm Brenda," she said, offering a firm handshake. "Traveling solo, post-divorce present to myself. Figured I deserved some sunshine after all the... Well, you know. She waved a hand dismissively, a wry smile playing on her lips. Finally, two women in their 30s, radiating an easy camaraderie, joined us. Chloe and Sarah, the more talkative one, Chloe, introduced them. Best friends since kindergarten. This is our annual escape the real-world trip. Sarah, quieter but with an observant gaze, nodded in agreement. And then there was me. Daniel, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. And what brings you on this fine vessel, Daniel? Arthur asked, his eyes kind. I hesitated. The truth felt too raw, too messy for a polite dinner conversation with strangers. Just needed a break, I said vaguely. Get away from things for a bit. It wasn't a lie, but it was a heavily edited version. They didn't press. Conversation flowed around me, a current I dipped into occasionally. Arthur told bad jokes that made Eleanor roll her eyes affectionately. Brenda spoke with a surprising frankness about the challenges and occasional absurdities of starting over. Chloe and Sarah recounted hilarious travel mishaps from previous trips. They all had their stories, their reasons for being adrift on this vast expanse of water. Their presence was, unexpectedly, less an intrusion and more a gentle buffer against my own thoughts. Still, the nights were the hardest. Insomnia, a cruel companion, clung to me. Back in my small cabin, the silence, once a comfort, now amplified the emptiness Sophia had left behind. The gentle rocking of the ship, meant to be soothing, just made me feel more unmoored. I'd lie there, staring at the sliver of moonlight on the water, replaying our last conversations, dissecting Sophia's breakup post, searching for clues I might have missed. The why of it all gnawed at me. On the second night, after hours of wrestling with my thoughts, I gave in. My hand, acting of its own accord, reached for my phone. I powered it on, the sudden brightness of the screen an assault on my eyes. Notifications flooded in, dozens of them, my heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped on Instagram, the familiar icon now a symbol of my public undoing. Sophia, of course. She'd posted again. A new selfie, this time looking pensively out a window, probably her new, better-for-networking apartment window. The caption was a masterclass in passive-aggressive concern. Thinking of those who might be struggling, it's so important to reach out if you see someone making erratic decisions. Mental health is so key. Sending love and light. #BeKind, #mental health awareness, #healing journey. Erratic decisions? She was talking about me. About my cruise. She was painting herself as the concerned, compassionate ex, while subtly positioning me as unhinged. The audacity of it stole my breath. My fingers tightened around the phone, a surge of anger, hot and sharp, cutting through the numbness. Then I saw the notifications for my own post, the cruise confirmation. It had, to my utter astonishment, gained traction. More likes and comments than anything I'd ever shared in my meager Instagram existence. Most were from friends, offering support, a few thumbs-up emojis. But there were others, from people I didn't know, acquaintances of acquaintances, even some of Sophia's followers. Good for you, man. That's the way to do it. Enjoy the freedom. Takes guts, respect. It was bizarre. My quiet, impulsive act of defiance, my attempt to escape the digital drama, had somehow become part of it. Even in the middle of the ocean, with miles of water separating me from my old life, I couldn't escape. The ship's Wi-Fi was notoriously slow, the connection patchy. But Sophia's curated image and my own unintended counter-narrative were still out there, bouncing off satellites for the world to see and dissect. Frustration warred with a strange, reluctant sense of validation. I wasn't just the sad ex-boyfriend. I was the guy who'd reacted to a public breakup with a heart emoji and a solo cruise. It wasn't the narrative I would have chosen, but It was, in a weird way, mine. With a sigh, I turned the phone off again. The screen went dark, and once more, I was alone with the sound of the waves and the turbulent sea of my own thoughts. Adrift, indeed. Day 3 dawned gray and ominous. The vibrant Caribbean blues of the previous days had been swallowed by a bruised, angry sky. The ship, which had glided so smoothly, now pitched and rolled with a disconcerting rhythm. Captain's voice, usually so jovial over the intercom, took on a more serious tone, announcing that we were encountering some unexpected rough weather. Passengers were advised to stay in their cabins if they were prone to seasickness. I wasn't usually prone to seasickness, but this was different. The physical instability of the ship mirrored my own emotional state. Already unmoored, I now found myself literally rocked by the storm. The gentle sway became a violent lurch, the creaks of the ship groans of protest. Outside my balcony window, the waves were monstrous. Gray behemoths crowned with white foam, smashing against the hull with a force that shuddered through the entire vessel. Confined to my cabin, there was no escape. No trivia games to distract, no crowded pool decks to get lost in. Just me, the raging storm outside, and the even more turbulent storm within. The walls of the small room seemed to close in, the air thick with unspoken words, unreleased grief. I found a notepad and pen in the desk drawer, the ship's logo emblazoned on them, and I started to write. A letter to Sophia. A letter I knew, even as the words flowed, that I would never send. Sophia, I don't even know where to begin. Or maybe I do, our anniversary. That's where you chose to begin this new chapter of yours. Did you even think about me? About what I'd be doing, feeling, picking up your gift, maybe? Or was that part of the engagement strategy? The potential for more drama, more clicks? You talked about authenticity in your post. What was authentic about our last 2 years, Soph? The perfectly filtered photos? The arguments we had when the camera was off because I wanted 5 minutes of your undivided attention. 5 minutes where you weren't thinking about captions or hashtags or how our love story was playing to your audience. The pen scratched across the paper, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. Flashbacks, no longer fleeting, but vivid and insistent, played behind my eyes. Sophia, staging a candid laugh for a selfie, her eyes darting to the phone screen to check the result before the sound had even died. Me, trying to talk to her about my day, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Just a sec, babe, gotta reply to this comment, it's a big brand. Our arguments about privacy, her growing obsession with engagement metrics, the way her self-worth seemed to rise and fall with the number of likes on a post. Red flags. So many red flags. Fluttering like celebratory banners at the parade of my own naivety. I'd seen them, hadn't I? But I'd chosen to ignore them, to believe in the Sophia I'd first fallen for, the one who dreamed of art and travel, not of algorithms and follower counts. I remember when we first met. You hated social media. You said it was all fake. Remember that? You wanted to paint, to create things that were real, tangible. When did that change? When did you become one of them? Or were you always performing and I was just too blind to see it? The ship groaned, a low, mournful sound, as a particularly large wave slammed into its side. The glass in the balcony door rattled. The storm outside was relentless, a physical manifestation of the anger, the hurt, the confusion that churned inside me. I wrote about the necklace, the wave pendant still tucked away in my suitcase, a cold, hard lump of unfulfilled promise. I wrote about my own complicity, my own failure to see where we were heading, my own quiet sacrifices made in the name of a love that had become increasingly one-sided, increasingly public. You said it was just business. Was I just business, Sophia? Were our 2 years just an extended marketing campaign? Because it felt real to me. The laughter, the late-night talks, the plans we made. Or did I imagine all of that? Hours passed. The pen moved, page after page filling with my messy scrawl. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and unexpected, but I didn't let them fall. This wasn't about sadness anymore. It was about excavating the truth, however painful. The storm raged on, a fitting soundtrack to my emotional exorcism. And then, as slowly as it had arrived, the worst of the weather began to subside. The violent lurching eased into a more manageable roll. The relentless roar of the wind and waves softened. A sliver of pale light broke through the oppressive clouds. I put down the pen, my hand aching, my throat dry. The letter, a thick stack of filled pages, lay on the desk. It was a mess of ink blots and crossed-out words, a testament to the tempest I'd just weathered. I emerged from my cabin later that afternoon, blinking in the weak sunlight that now bathed the deck. The air was fresh, washed clean by the storm. The sea, though still choppy, had lost its menacing edge, and I felt different. Still hurt, yes. The wound was too deep to heal overnight, but the raw, consuming anger had dissipated, replaced by a strange, quiet clarity. The storm had forced a confrontation, not with Sophia, but with myself. With the truth of our relationship, the red flags I'd ignored, the slow erosion of what we'd once had. There was a certain peace in that clarity, a grim acceptance. I walked to the ship's railing, looking out at the now calming ocean. I wasn't going to spend the rest of this cruise hiding in my cabin, replaying the past. Sophia had made her choices. Now it was time to make mine. I decided then and there to truly engage with this strange, floating world, not as an escape, but as an experience, whatever that might bring. I took the unsent letter, tore it into small pieces, and let them fly from my hand, carried away by the wind, scattering like white birds over the vast, indifferent sea. That evening, feeling a fragile sense of purpose, I scanned the ship's daily schedule. Tucked away between advanced napkin folding and salsa for beginners was a small listing: Solo Traveler's Mixer Starlight Lounge Deck 7. My first instinct was to recoil. The idea of a forced social gathering, a room full of people probably just as awkward and lonely as I was, felt like a special kind of hell. But the Daniel who had hidden in his cabin was, I hoped, the Daniel who had been metaphorically torn apart and pieced back together during the storm. The new, or at least newly resolved, Daniel had made a promise to engage. The Starlight Lounge was dimly lit, with a small bar at one end and clusters of slightly uncomfortable-looking people nursing their drinks. Classic. I grabbed a club soda. Alcohol felt like a bad idea given my still tender emotional state, and found an empty corner. I was steeling myself for an hour of awkward small talk when a woman approached my table. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. Her voice was warm, with a slight, unplaceable accent. She was tall, with sun-bleached brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and eyes the color of the sea after a storm, a clear, intelligent gray-green. She wore a simple linen shirt and cargo pants, a stark contrast to the resort wear most passengers sported. "No, please," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "I'm Elena," she said, settling in, "and you look like you'd rather be anywhere but here." I managed a small laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to a fellow connoisseur of reluctant social obligations," she said, her lips curving into a wry smile. "I'm actually staff, not a passenger, but they rope us into these things sometimes. To, mingle." She made air quotes around the word mingle. "Daniel," I said, offering my hand. Her grip was firm, her hands capable-looking. So, what kind of staff are you, if you don't mind me asking? You don't exactly scream Huffleboard coordinator. Her smile widened. Marine biologist. I give lectures on ocean conservation, help out with some of the ship's environmental programs. A marine biologist. It was so unexpected, so refreshingly real. Unlike Sophia, whose identity had become increasingly intertwined with her online persona, Elena seemed grounded in something tangible, something vital. That sounds fascinating, I said, and I meant it. A lot more interesting than, well, most jobs. It has its moments, she said, though sometimes explaining the intricacies of coral bleaching to a group of people whose main concern is whether the midnight buffet will have shrimp again can be a challenge. We talked, not about breakups or viral posts or the curated highlight reels of our lives. We talked about the ocean, about the places this giant ship visited, about the subtle and not so subtle impact of tourism on fragile ecosystems. Elena spoke with a quiet passion, her knowledge deep, and her concern genuine. She didn't once pull out her phone to check notifications. She didn't pause to frame the perfect shot of her cocktail against the sunset visible through the lounge window. Her attention was entirely on our conversation. It struck me then, this was the first real conversation I'd had in months, maybe longer, that wasn't interrupted by the ping of a notification, the click of a camera, or the pressure to perform for an unseen audience. It was just two people talking, analog, present. We have these small behind-the-scenes tours sometimes, Elena said, as the mixer began to wind down, the cruise director attempting to herd everyone into a conga line. For passengers who are genuinely interested in the ship's environmental initiatives, it's not on the official schedule. Less glitz, more actual stuff. If you're interested, I could let you know when the next one is. I'd like that very much, I said, surprised by my own enthusiasm. Good, she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. It's good to meet someone who's more interested in the engine room than the ice sculpture. She didn't ask why I was on the cruise alone. She didn't offer platitudes or knowing glances. She just treated me like a person, not a story, not a problem to be solved. As I walked back to my cabin that night, the gentle rocking of the ship felt less like being adrift and more like being carried. The storm had passed, and in its wake, something new, something unexpected had begun to take root. A connection. A simple, uncomplicated, human connection. And it felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd taken in a very long time. Elena. Her name was a quiet melody in the receding roar of my own internal chaos. The next morning, the ship docked at a small, vibrant Caribbean island. Tortola, the schedule said. The usual throng of passengers disembarked, chattering excitedly about pre-booked excursions, catamaran snorkel trips, rum distillery tours, shopping sprees for duty-free jewelry. Sophia would have had a detailed itinerary, every picturesque spot mapped out, every outfit planned for maximum Instagram impact. The thought brought a familiar pang, but it was duller now, less sharp. I remembered Elena's words from the night before. As I was leaving the Starlight Lounge, she'd caught my arm. Tortola, she'd said, her voice low. If you want to see something real, skip the main tourist drag in Road Town. Rent a scooter, head for Cane Garden Bay, but then take the little road up the west side. There's a place called Quito's Gazebo. Local food, local music, right on the water. And ask for the passion fruit daiquiri. Trust me. So, instead of joining the herds filing onto air-conditioned buses, I found a slightly battered scooter rental a few blocks from the port. The humid air, thick with the scent of frangipani and diesel, felt good on my skin. I strapped on the flimsy helmet, the engine sputtering to life beneath me, and headed out, away from the polished veneer of the cruise terminal. The island unfolded before me, a tapestry of lush green hillsides tumbling down to turquoise bays. Brightly painted houses clung to the slopes. Goats wandered nonchalantly across the winding roads, and the sound of reggae music drifted from unseen sources. It was beautiful, in a way that felt raw and unmanipulated. I found Quito's gazebo just as Elena had described, a rustic, open-air restaurant perched on the edge of a stunning, crescent-shaped beach. A few locals nursed beers at the bar, their conversation a lilting, incomprehensible patois. An older man with a deeply lined face strummed a guitar in the corner, his voice a soulful croon. I ordered the grilled snapper and, on Elena's recommendation, a passion fruit daiquiri. It arrived, a vibrant orange concoction, and it was, without a doubt, the best damn daiquiri I'd ever tasted. The fish was fresh, perfectly cooked, served with rice and peas and a fiery homemade hot sauce. I ate slowly, savoring the flavors, the warmth of the sun on my face, the gentle rhythm of the waves. And for the first time, in what felt like years, I wasn't thinking about documenting the experience. My phone stayed in my pocket. There were no filters to choose, no witty captions to compose. There was just the moment, rich and full and entirely my own. Later, as I was nursing a second daiquiri and feeling a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible, a man with a camera approached my table. He was lean, with kind eyes and dreadlocks threaded with silver. "You mind?" he asked, gesturing with his camera towards the bay, where a group of children were splashing in the shallows, their laughter echoing in the afternoon air. "Not at all," I said. He smiled. "I'm Marcus," he said. "Local photographer. I try to capture the real life here, you know? Not just the postcards." We started talking. He told me about the island, its history, its struggles, its joys. He had a quiet dignity, a deep love for his home that was infectious. He wasn't trying to sell me anything, wasn't performing for an audience. He was just sharing. "There's a small celebration tonight," Marcus said after a while. "Up in the hills. A friend's daughter just had her first child, music, food, dancing. Nothing fancy, not for tourists. But if you're interested in seeing how we really live..." He trailed off, leaving the invitation open. A part of me, the old Daniel, would have hesitated, made excuses. Too intrusive, too unfamiliar. But the Daniel who had booked a solo cruise on a whim, the Daniel who had felt the sting of performative living, was intrigued. "I'd be honored," I said. That evening, Marcus picked me up on his ancient, sputtering motorbike. We wound our way up steep, narrow roads, deeper into the island's interior. The air grew cooler, scented with damp earth and wood smoke. We arrived at a small clearing where a modest house glowed with light and pulsed with music. It was exactly as Marcus had described, not fancy, but vibrant, alive. People spilled out from the house into the yard, talking, laughing, their faces illuminated by strings of colored lights and the glow of a bonfire. The air was thick with the smell of roasting pork and spices. A steel drum band played infectious rhythms that made it impossible to stand still. I felt awkward at first, an obvious outsider, but Marcus introduced me around, and people greeted me with warm smiles and curious questions. No one asked about my Instagram handle. No one tried to take a selfie with the token tourist. They offered me home-brewed ginger beer, piled my plate high with food, and pulled me into the swirling, joyous chaos of the dancing. I danced. Badly at first, then with a growing abandon, a shedding of self-consciousness. The music was in my blood, the rhythm of the drums a heartbeat that connected us all. I took mental photographs, 1,000 of them. The way the firelight danced on smiling faces, the uninhibited joy of a grandmother twirling with her grandchild. the deep, soulful connection between the musicians. These were images no filter could enhance, no caption could adequately describe. When I returned to the ship late that night, my clothes smelling of wood smoke and sweat, my ears ringing with music, my heart full, I felt more alive than I had in years. My cabin, usually a stark reminder of my solitude, now felt like a quiet haven, a place to process the richness of the day. I realized then how much of my life with Sophia had been lived for the camera, for the approval of unseen followers. We'd gone to beautiful places, eaten at amazing restaurants, but had we truly experienced them? Or had we merely collected them, like digital souvenirs, to be displayed and envied? The island, in its unvarnished authenticity, had shown me something profound. It wasn't about rejecting the modern world entirely, but about finding the balance, about choosing the real over the performative, the experience over the documentation. It was a lesson Elena had subtly guided me towards, and one I was finally beginning to understand. My experience in Tortola, so rich and unexpectedly profound, seemed to crack open something within me. When I sat down for dinner that evening at table 37, the usual pre-meal awkwardness was replaced by a quiet eagerness. I had something real to share, something that wasn't tinged with bitterness or the ghost of Sophia's Instagram feed. "You look like you've seen the sun, Daniel," Eleanor remarked, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Arthur nodded in agreement, a playful glint in his own. "I, rented a scooter," I began, and found myself recounting the day, the ride through the hills, Quito's gazebo, the passion fruit daiquiri, and finally, hesitantly, the evening with Marcus and the local celebration. I didn't embellish, didn't try to make it sound cooler than it was. I just told it. They listened, truly listened. Brenda leaned forward, her earlier weariness replaced by an engaged curiosity. Chloe and Sarah peppered me with questions, their usual light-hearted banter giving way to genuine interest. Arthur, ever the joker, even feigned jealousy. 50 years I've been coming to the Caribbean, and I've never been invited to a proper local pig roast. Eleanor, we're doing something wrong." "Perhaps you haven't been looking in the right places, dear," Eleanor said gently, then turned to me. "It sounds like you had a wonderful day, Daniel, a real one." Her emphasis on real resonated. It was exactly what it had been. Over the next few days, our dinner table transformed. It was no longer just a collection of strangers sharing a meal. It became a sanctuary, a place of unexpected camaraderie. Fueled by my own tentative opening, others began to share more freely, too. Arthur and Eleanor, with their half-century of shared history, didn't offer advice directly, but their stories, told with humor and a deep, abiding affection, were lessons in themselves. They talked about weathering storms, literal ones on previous travels, and the metaphorical ones that every long relationship inevitably faces. "It's not about avoiding the rough seas, Daniel," Arthur said one evening, his gaze surprisingly serious. "It's about learning to navigate them together, and knowing when to just cling to the rigging and trust your first mate." Eleanor had squeezed his hand then, a silent affirmation that spoke volumes. Their love wasn't the showy, performative kind Sophia had chased. It was a quiet, sturdy vessel, built to last. Brenda, emboldened perhaps by my own vulnerability, started to speak more about her divorce. Not in a bitter, man-hating way, but with a raw honesty about the pain of reinvention, the fear of being alone after decades as part of a couple, and the surprising, exhilarating rush of newfound independence. "You know, for the longest time I was Brenda and Tom," she confessed, swirling the wine in her glass. "Now I'm just Brenda. And some days that's terrifying. But other days it feels like I can finally breathe. Like I'm figuring out who Brenda actually is, not who she was supposed to be." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I was just beginning to figure out who Daniel was, separate from Daniel and Sophia. Chloe and Sarah, with their effortless, supportive friendship, offered a different kind of model. They weren't romantic partners, but their bond was undeniably deep, a testament to years of shared laughter, tears, and unwavering loyalty. They finished each other's sentences, knew each other's stories inside out, and provided a constant, reassuring presence for one another. Their connection was a reminder that love and support came in many forms, not just the romantic kind that could be so easily shattered and sensationalized. One evening, after a particularly potent cocktail of shipboard camaraderie and several glasses of wine, I found myself talking about Sophia. Really talking. Not just the vague, needed a break line, but the whole sordid tale, the anniversary, the Instagram post, the "it's just business" justification. The words tumbled out, a jumbled mess of hurt and anger and bewildered disbelief. I hadn't planned to share it, but the atmosphere at our table felt safe, insulated from the judgment of the outside world. No one interrupted. They just listened. Eleanor's eyes held a gentle sympathy. Arthur shook his head, a frown creasing his usually jovial face. Brenda let out a low whistle. "Wow," she said softly when I'd finished. "That's next level brutal. And I thought my ex was bad for changing the Netflix password." And then, the most unexpected thing happened. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh, not exactly. It was a laugh born of sheer absurdity, of the dawning realization of how utterly ridiculous some of it had been. Me, reacting with a heart emoji to my own public execution. Sophia, vlogging her authentic breakup while her movers were practically en route. The digital drama, the carefully constructed narratives, the sheer, unadulterated performance of it all. "She said," I choked out between gasps of laughter. "She said her followers respond well to vulnerability. I guess I was just excellent content." Brenda snorted into her wine. Chloe and Sarah were giggling. Even Arthur cracked a smile, though Eleanor still looked maternally concerned. "Oh, honey," Brenda said, reaching across the table to pat my arm. "You are so much more than content. And honestly, anyone who thinks a breakup is a business strategy needs to have their head examined, or at least their social media account suspended." That dinner became a turning point. The table became our impromptu therapy circle, our confessional booth, our comedy club. We dissected relationships, lamented bad decisions, celebrated small victories, and found solace in shared humanity. For the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel so utterly alone. I was surrounded by people who, in their own ways, were navigating their own choppy waters, and who, for a few hours each evening, were willing to share their compasses. It was Chloe who proposed the pact. "Okay," she announced, her eyes shining with a mischievous glint midway through the cruise. "We're all on this ship, literally and figuratively adrift in some way. Before this journey ends, we each have to do something that scares us, something outside our comfort zone. Deal?" Brenda, surprisingly, was the first to agree. "I'm in. God knows my comfort zone has been a pretty miserable place lately." Arthur winked. "Eleanor, my dear, I think it's time I finally tried that rock climbing wall. Doctor's approval pending, of course." Eleanor just smiled, a look of fond exasperation on her face. Sarah, usually the quietest, nodded slowly. "Okay, I have something in mind." All eyes turned to me, something that scared me. My mind raced. Public speaking? Unlikely. Confronting Sophia? Definitely not ready for that, and geographically impossible. Then it hit me. Something I'd always wanted to try, something Sophia had subtly discouraged because it wouldn't photograph well, and my hair would get all messy. Scuba diving, I said, the words out before I could second-guess them. I've always been a bit terrified of deep water, of what's down there. A thrill, mixed with a healthy dose of fear, shot through me. The pact was made. We clinked our water glasses, and Brenda's wine glass, together, a silent toast to facing our fears, to finding something new in the vast, unpredictable ocean, both outside and within.